Your body is a living museum. It is a masterpiece of biological engineering, sculpted by the relentless and patient hands of 4 billion years of evolution. Every organ, every bone, and every cell tells a story of survival, of adaptation, and of a world that no longer exists. We tend to think of evolution as something grand and distant, a force that shaped the dinosaurs or turned apes into early humans. We see it in textbooks and documentaries, a story of the past. But what if I told you that this ancient story is not just history? What if it is a living narrative, and your own body is the manuscript? What if evolution is not just something that happened to us, but is something that is happening within us, right now, in this very moment? Today, we are going on an extraordinary journey of self-discovery. We are going to become archaeologists of our own anatomy, dusting off the hidden relics and forgotten artifacts that lie just beneath our skin. We will be exploring the fascinating world of vestigial structures, parts of our bodies that have lost their original ancestral function. These are not mistakes or design flaws. They are echoes. They are the ghostly remnants of abilities our ancestors once relied upon for their very survival, abilities we have long since abandoned. We will be focusing on a specific set of these echoes, muscles that humanity is, slowly but surely, evolving out of. And the most remarkable part of this journey is that you will not need a textbook or a microscope. All you will need is your own body and a little bit of curiosity. This is an interactive exploration. We will perform simple tests that allow you to see with your own eyes and feel with your own hands the story of evolution playing out in your own form. Prepare to look at your own body in a way you never have before, because you are about to discover that you are a walking, breathing testament to a deep and beautiful evolutionary past. Before we begin our self-examination, we must first grasp the profound and often misunderstood principles that govern this process. What does it truly mean to evolve out of something? The driving force is, of course, natural selection. This is the process by which traits that offer a survival or reproductive advantage in a given environment become more common in a population over generations. Our ancestors who were faster, stronger, or better able to digest available foods were more likely to live long enough to have children and pass on the genes for those advantageous traits. But there is a flip side to this coin. What happens to traits that are no longer needed? What happens when the environment changes so dramatically that a once critical tool becomes obsolete? This is where the concept of use it or lose it comes into play, but not in the way most people think. It's not that if you as an individual stop using a muscle, your children will be born without it. That is a Lamarckian idea that has long been disproven. Instead, the modern understanding is more subtle and is based on energy conservation and genetic drift. Every single structure in your body, no matter how small, requires energy to build, maintain, and operate. In a world of scarcity, energy is the ultimate currency. If a muscle is no longer providing a significant survival advantage, there is no longer a strong selective pressure to maintain it in perfect working order. A random genetic mutation might occur that causes that muscle to be smaller, weaker, or even completely absent. In our ancestors' world, if that mutation affected a critical muscle for climbing or hunting, that individual would be at a serious disadvantage. But if the mutation affects a now obsolete muscle, there is no disadvantage at all. In fact, there might be a tiny, almost imperceptible advantage. The body saves the minuscule amount of energy it would have spent on that useless muscle. That individual is just as likely to survive and reproduce as anyone else, and they can pass on the gene for the absent muscle to their offspring. Over thousands upon thousands of generations, across a vast population, this trait, the absence of the unnecessary muscle, can become more and more common. It is not that evolution is an intelligent designer, actively removing parts. It is more like a pragmatic sculptor, simply ceasing to maintain the features that no longer contribute to the final form. So these vestigial muscles are not signs of being less evolved. In fact, you could argue the opposite. Their absence is a sign of humanity's ongoing adaptation to a new way of life. They are the faded footprints of a path we no longer walk, a testament to how profoundly our lives have changed. Now, with that understanding, let our archaeological dig begin. Our first and perhaps most famous artifact is a slender, forgotten muscle in your forearm. It is called the palmaris longus. I want you to perform a simple test with me right now. Rest the back of your forearm on a flat surface like a table, with your palm facing up. Now, gently touch your pinky finger to your thumb. As you do this, slightly flex your wrist, as if you are trying to lift your hand off the table just a little. Look at the inside of your wrist. Do you see a distinct rope-like tendon that pops up in the middle, running from your forearm into your hand? If you see that tendon, congratulations. You have a palmaris longus muscle. It is this tendon that is the most visible part of the muscle, which itself is a small, teardrop-shaped muscle located further up your forearm. Now, if you perform the same test and your wrist remains perfectly smooth in the center, with no tendon popping up, then you are one of the growing number of people who have been born without this muscle. Don't be alarmed. You are not missing anything essential. You are simply a clear, walking example of human evolution in action. So what is this ghostly muscle, and what did it once do? The palmaris longus is a relic from a time when our ancestors' lives were far more arboreal. Its primary function was to provide strength and stability for flexion of the wrist and to tense the palm. For a primate that spends its life brachiating, swinging from branch to branch with incredible force and agility, this muscle would have been a critical component of their gripping and climbing apparatus. It would have provided extra strength for latching onto branches and supporting their body weight. You can see its importance in modern primates like lemurs and monkeys, where the muscle is much larger and more developed. It was, in essence, an ancient climbing rope woven into the fabric of our forearm. Why, then, is it disappearing? The answer lies in the story of our own 2 feet. When our ancestors descended from the trees and began to walk upright, the evolutionary pressure on our upper body changed dramatically. Our hands were freed from the burden of locomotion and became specialized tools for manipulation, for crafting, for gesturing. The kind of raw, powerful wrist flexion needed for swinging through a forest canopy was no longer a primary requirement for survival. The fine motor control needed to nap a flint tool or wield a needle became far more important. The palmaris longus, our old climbing rope, became largely redundant. The other, more powerful muscles in the forearm were more than sufficient for the gripping and wrist movements of our new terrestrial lives. As a result, the selective pressure to maintain it vanished. Random mutations that led to its absence were no longer weeded out by natural selection. Over millennia, its absence has become increasingly common. The prevalence of this missing muscle tells a fascinating story of human migration and genetics. Today, about 15 to 20% of the human population is missing the palmaris longus in at least one arm. However, this number varies dramatically across different ethnic groups. In some African and Asian populations, the absence rate is as low as 4 or 5%. In contrast, in some Caucasian populations, particularly those of European descent, the absence rate can be as high as 25% or even more. This suggests that the evolutionary decision to discard this muscle may have become more prominent after our ancestors migrated out of Africa and adapted to different environments. But is this muscle completely useless for those who still have it? Not at all. And this is where the story takes a modern medical twist. While its absence has no effect on grip strength, its presence has made it the go-to muscle for surgeons. When a surgeon needs to repair a torn tendon or reconstruct a ligament elsewhere in the body, they often need a piece of donor tendon. The palmaris longus tendon is the perfect candidate. It is long, strong, and its removal from the forearm causes no functional deficit. It is, in a very real sense, a spare part that your body has been carrying around for millions of years. It is a piece of your evolutionary past that can be used to literally reconstruct your present. Now, let's move from our arms to our head, to a set of muscles that tell a story of a world filled with unseen dangers. We are talking about the auricular muscles, the small, subtle muscles that surround your ears. For our next test, I want you to sit quietly for a moment and, without moving your head, try to wiggle your ears. Can you do it? Can you make them move up and down or back and forth even a little bit? A small number of people can do this with surprising dexterity. Many more can achieve a slight flicker with intense concentration. And for the vast majority of us, no matter how hard we try, our ears remain stubbornly still. Whether you can wiggle them or not, you still have these muscles. They are part of our shared mammalian heritage, but for most of us, they have become neurologically disconnected. Another set of vestigial tools we have forgotten how to use. What was their original purpose? To find out, you need only look at your dog or cat. When they hear a faint, interesting sound, their ears don't stay still. They pivot and swivel like tiny satellite dishes, instantly and precisely orienting towards the source of the sound. This is the original function of the auricular muscles. For our distant, four-legged ancestors, and for many mammals today, this ability is a critical survival tool. In a world where you are both a hunter and the hunted, being able to pinpoint the exact location of the faintest sound, the rustle of a predator in the grass, the scuttling of potential prey, is the difference between finding a meal and becoming one. The ability to independently move the ears allowed our ancestors to scan the auditory landscape of their environment with incredible precision, all while keeping their eyes fixed forward. So, why did we lose this ability? The reason is twofold. First, as primates, we evolved a remarkably flexible and mobile neck. A cat needs to pivot its ears because turning its entire head is a more cumbersome movement. We, on the other hand, can whip our heads around with incredible speed and a wide range of motion. We no longer needed our ears to be the primary movers. Our entire head had become the satellite dish. The second reason is the very shape of our ears. The complex folds and curves of the human outer ear, or pinna, are not random. They are exquisitely shaped to help us determine the direction of a sound, particularly whether it is coming from in front of us, behind us, or above or below us, without having to move. The sound waves bounce off these folds in different ways, providing our brain with the subtle cues it needs to localize the sound. As our necks became more mobile and our ears became more sophisticated sound catchers, the need for the auricular muscles to perform their swiveling function diminished. The neural pathways that controlled their fine motor movements were no longer strongly selected for. The muscles are still there, a silent reminder of a time when our very lives depended on the ability to prick up our ears at the slightest sound in the dark. Our next artifact takes us to the core of our body, to a small and often forgotten muscle in the lower abdomen. It is called the pyramidalis. This muscle is a small, triangular muscle that sits just in front of the larger rectus abdominis, your six-pack muscle. To test for its function, lie on your back with your knees bent. Place your fingers on your lower abdomen, a few inches below your belly button. Now, try to gently lift just your head off the floor, as if you are starting a crunch. Do you feel a small, distinct band of muscle tense up right in the midline, just above your pubic bone? It can be a very subtle sensation. About 20% of people are missing the pyramidalis muscle on one or both sides. Once again, its absence has no impact on core strength or function. The story of the pyramidalis takes us on a fascinating detour into a different branch of the mammalian family tree. This muscle is much more prominent and important in marsupials, like kangaroos and opossums. In these animals, the pyramidalis is one of the key muscles that helps to support and tense their distinctive pouch, where they carry their young. Our shared, distant mammalian ancestry means that we inherited the genetic blueprint for this muscle. But as placental mammals, our reproductive strategy changed. We no longer needed an external pouch. The function of the pyramidalis was largely taken over by the larger and more powerful abdominal muscles that were evolving to support our upright posture. It became another piece of obsolete biological machinery, a faint muscular echo of a time before the placenta, a tiny reminder of a pouch we never had. Our final muscular vestige is one that is so slender and has such a long, delicate tendon that it was often mistaken for a nerve by early medical students, earning it the nickname the freshman's nerve. It is called the plantaris. This muscle is located deep in the back of your lower leg, running alongside your larger calf muscles. It is so small and weak that its contribution to ankle movement is negligible. In fact, you can't really perform a direct test for it. Its presence is most often noted by surgeons or seen on an MRI. It is also one of the most variable muscles in the human body. Some people have a large one, some a tiny one, and an estimated 10 to 20% of people are born without it. Like the palmaris longus in our arm, the plantaris is a relic of our tree-dwelling past. Its long tendon attaches near the heel and would have been involved in providing sensory feedback and fine motor control for gripping with the feet. For an ancestor that used its feet almost like a second set of hands to grasp branches, this muscle would have been far more important. As we became bipedal and our feet evolved into rigid, stable platforms for walking and running, the need for a foot that could grasp and manipulate vanished. The plantaris, like its counterpart in the forearm, lost its primary purpose. And just like the palmaris longus, it has found a second life in the operating room. Its long, sturdy tendon makes it an excellent source for grafts to repair other, more important tendons around the body, particularly the Achilles tendon. It is another spare part, a forgotten gripping tool from our arboreal past that we carry hidden within our calves. This story of evolutionary leftovers is not confined to our muscular system. To truly appreciate the context, we must look at a few other famous examples. Consider goosebumps. When you are cold or frightened, tiny muscles at the base of your body hairs called the erector pili contract and cause your hairs to stand on end. This is a vestigial reflex. For our much hairier ancestors, this had two functions. First, fluffing up their coat of fur would have trapped a layer of air, providing extra insulation against the cold. Second, it would have made them appear larger and more intimidating to a potential threat, a visual bluff that you can still see in a startled cat. For our relatively hairless bodies, this reflex serves no real purpose. It is a neurological ghost, a memory of a fur coat we no longer possess. Then there are our wisdom teeth, the appendix, and our tailbone. Our ancestors had larger jaws and a coarser diet that required more chewing power, making a third set of molars useful. As our diets softened and our brains grew, our jaws became smaller, leaving no room for these late-arriving teeth. The appendix, long dismissed as a useless and troublesome organ, is now believed to be a vestige of a larger digestive chamber and may now serve a new purpose as a safe house for beneficial gut bacteria. And of course, the coccyx, or tailbone at the base of our spine, is the most direct and undeniable evidence of our tailed past. It is the remnant of a structure that was once essential for balance and communication. Each of these tells a part of the same story, the story of a body in transition. This brings us to a final, tantalizing question. If evolution is an ongoing process, what is next? What parts of our bodies are currently on the path to becoming the vestigial structures of the future? We can only speculate, but we can make some educated guesses based on our modern lifestyle. Our little toes, for example, are far less important for balance in a world where we wear supportive shoes, and many people are born with them fused or underdeveloped. With our increasing reliance on technology, will the fine motor muscles of our hands change? Will the muscles that control our eyes adapt to a lifetime of staring at screens? We do not know for sure. Evolution works on a timescale far longer than a human lifetime. But one thing is certain: the human form is not a final, finished product. It is a work in progress. In conclusion, your body is not a perfectly designed machine. It is a beautiful, messy, and fascinating mosaic of your deep past and your unfolding future. The palmaris longus on your wrist, the silent auriculars around your ears, the subtle pyramidalis in your abdomen, and the hidden plantaris in your leg are not flaws. They are stories written in flesh and bone. They are a direct, physical connection to your ancestors who swung through trees, who listened for predators in the night, and who navigated a world that we can now only imagine. Whether you possess these muscles or not is not a measure of your worth or your fitness. It is simply a reflection of the beautiful, random, and ongoing dance of genetics and time. The next time you look in the mirror, look a little closer. Look for the echoes of evolution. Appreciate that you are not just an individual but a living museum, carrying within you the entire epic story of what it means to be human.